Since late 2023, the world's largest container shipping companies have been adding 10 to 14 days to every Asia to Europe voyage that would normally go through the Suez Canal. On some large ships, the diversion adds close to $1 million in extra fuel and operating cost. They're doing it on purpose. They're doing it to avoid an 18-mile-wide strait that was never legally closed. This is the Bab-el-Mandeb, the Gate of Tears, the southern entrance to the Red Sea, and the only sea approach to the Suez Canal. The connected Red Sea and Suez route normally carries around 10 to 15% of global seaborne trade. In 2023, more than 26,000 ships transited the Suez Canal. The year after, that number fell to roughly half. The reason for the diversion is not a navy. It is a non-state actor in Yemen, equipped by Iran, attacking commercial ships with anti-ship ballistic missiles, cruise missiles, and one-way attack drones. The United States ran a major strike campaign through 2025. Over 1,000 targets struck inside Yemen, and the carriers kept rerouting anyway. This episode is about a choke point that was never legally closed and stopped working as a shipping route regardless. The Bab-el-Mandeb is about 20 miles across at its widest shoreline-to-shoreline measurement, from Yemen on the Arabian Peninsula to Djibouti and Eritrea on the Horn of Africa. At its narrowest navigable point, it's closer to 18 miles. The strait is split into two channels by a small island called Perim. The western channel, about 16 miles wide, is the deep water route used by international commercial shipping. The eastern channel, only 2 miles wide and much shallower, is used for local traffic. To approach the strait from the Indian Ocean, ships sail through the Gulf of Aden. To exit it into the Mediterranean, they sail north up the Red Sea to the Suez Canal. Directly across from Yemen, on the western shore of the strait, is Djibouti, a country of about 1 million people whose economy and security depend almost entirely on its geographic position. Djibouti hosts what is now the densest cluster of foreign military bases anywhere in the world. The United States operates Camp Lemonnier, one of the largest American military installations in Africa. China runs its first overseas naval base just a few kilometers away. France has maintained a military presence since Djiboutian independence in 1977. Japan operates its first overseas military base since World War II. Italy maintains a forward operating base. The presence of 5 major powers within walking distance of each other on one coastline is itself a sign of how consequential the geography is. This geography is what made the attacks possible. An 18-mile-wide choke point adjacent to a war zone where a non-state actor has territorial control on one shore. Ships passing through the strait must transit predictable corridors. From the Yemeni coast, those corridors are well within the range of even modest anti-ship weapon systems. Before the Houthi campaign began in late 2023, the Red Sea and Suez route was one of the world's busiest shipping corridors. Estimates of its share of global trade vary by metric and source, but the connected Bab-el-Mandeb to Suez route normally carries somewhere between 10 and 15% of global seaborne trade. Egyptian government figures, joint statements from the Group of 12 in 2024, and industry analyses cluster within that range. The route handles a large share of containerized goods moving between Asia and Europe: clothing, electronics, machinery, automotive parts, as well as significant volumes of oil and liquefied natural gas. On the petroleum side specifically, the U.S. Energy Information Administration tracked roughly 9 million barrels per day of crude oil and refined petroleum products transiting Bab-el-Mandeb in 2023. By 2024, that number had fallen to around 4 million barrels per day. The decline was not because oil stopped being demanded. It was because oil tankers, like container ships, were rerouting around the Cape of Good Hope. Bab-el-Mandeb went from being the third busiest oil choke point in the world, after the Strait of Hormuz and the Strait of Malacca, to a route that many tankers were no longer willing to transit. On the Suez Canal side, the northern exit from the Red Sea, the impact was equally dramatic. The Egyptian Suez Canal Authority recorded more than 26,000 ship transits in 2023. In 2024, that number fell to roughly 13,000. The route the world treated as normal, Asia to Europe, via Bab-el-Mandeb and Suez, became a route the world's shipping companies could no longer reliably use. The Houthi campaign began in November of 2023, weeks after the October 7th attacks by Hamas on Israel and Israel's military response in Gaza. The Houthis, a Yemeni political military movement officially called Ansar Allah, allied with Iran, controlling the northwestern third of Yemen, including the Red Sea coastline, declared they would target commercial shipping linked to Israel, the United States, and the United Kingdom in solidarity with Palestinians. Over the following months, the targeting criteria broadened. By 2024, the Houthis were attacking vessels with any of dozens of nationality, ownership, or port call associations with the three named countries. Vessels with no association at all were sometimes hit by accident or by weapons that missed their intended target. The weapons used were Iranian-supplied or Iranian-derived. Anti-ship ballistic missiles, with some systems assessed at around 200-kilometer range, capable of striking ships well beyond the Bab-el-Mandeb choke point itself. Cruise missiles, one-way attack drones, uncrewed surface vehicles, small remotely piloted boats loaded with explosives used in suicide attacks, small arms fire from boarding craft, explosive boats. The arsenal was deeper and more sophisticated than the international community initially expected from a non-state actor. By mid-2025, the United States Maritime Administration tracked more than 100 attacks on commercial shipping, connected to vessels and crews from more than 60 nations. Two of the deadliest attacks occurred in July of 2025. The Houthis attacked and sank two vessels, the Magic Seas and the Eternity Sea, between July 6th and 8th. The crew of Magic Seas abandoned ship after the attack. The Eternity Sea took multiple strikes. Across both attacks, 4 seafarers were killed, with the fatality reporting centered on the Eternity Sea. The Maritime Administration's official advisory documents both sinkings as part of a single coordinated escalation. In September of 2025, the Houthis struck a Dutch-flagged cargo ship in the Gulf of Aden with a missile, killing 1 mariner. Then, in October of 2025, an Israel-Hamas ceasefire took effect. The Houthis paused commercial ship attacks. According to the U.S. Maritime Administration's most recent advisory, no commercial ships have been attacked since that October ceasefire. The advisory remains active because the threat persists. In 2026, as tensions escalated between the United States and Iran, the Houthis warned they were prepared to resume attacks. The Maritime Administration treats this as a continuing risk to commercial vessels, not a current campaign of confirmed strikes. The international response to the Houthi campaign involved 3 distinct naval missions, not one. The first was Operation Prosperity Guardian, a United States-led maritime security mission launched in December of 2023 to escort commercial vessels through the southern Red Sea and the Gulf of Aden. The second was Operation Aspides, a European Union naval protection mission, deployed in February of 2024 under EU Council authority, focused on defending commercial vessels rather than striking the Houthis. The third was Operation Rough Rider, the United States strike campaign inside Yemen itself, launched on March 15th of 2025. Each mission had a different objective. Operation Rough Rider was substantial. United States Central Command reported that by April 27th of 2025, less than 6 weeks after the operation began, Rough Rider had struck more than 800 targets inside Yemen. By the time the operation reached its May 2025 pause, coinciding with a U.S. Houthi ceasefire, the target count had passed 1,000. Missile launchers, drone storage facilities, radar systems, command nodes, and other Houthi military infrastructure were struck. Houthi attack capabilities were measurably degraded. Missile and drone launch rates against shipping declined. The Pentagon's strike campaign succeeded by its own military metrics. The strikes also generated legal controversy. The White House notified Congress under the War Powers Resolution. The President characterized the campaign as an exercise of Article II Commander-in-Chief authority, defense of U.S. forces, and protection of freedom of navigation. Critics, including members of Congress, argued that this did not constitute a congressional authorization for sustained military operations against Yemen. Internationally, the United States and its allies framed the strikes as defense of navigation. Russia, China, and Algeria raised concerns at the UN Security Council about military action affecting Yemeni sovereignty. The legal questions remain contested. Despite the strikes, despite the escort missions, despite measurable military success, the commercial shipping companies did not return to the Red Sea in significant numbers. Maersk, the world's largest container shipping firm, paused trans-Suez sailings in March of 2026 following renewed escalation. Other carriers, CMA, CGM, Hapag-Lloyd, tested partial returns to the route, then pulled back when conditions tightened again. The decision to reroute was not, fundamentally, a military decision. It was a commercial one. Navies can intercept incoming missiles. Navies do not underwrite cargo insurance. The Cape of Good Hope diversion costs are mostly composed of 3 elements. The first is voyage time, typically 10 to 14 additional days for an Asia to Europe round trip. The second is fuel and operating cost, on some large vessels, close to $1 million in additional cost per voyage, according to maritime market analyses. The third, less visible but more strategically important, is insurance. Marine insurance for vessels transiting designated war risk areas costs substantially more than insurance for normal transit. The Lloyd's of London Joint War Committee, the industry body that classifies maritime regions as high risk, kept the southern Red Sea and Gulf of Aden on its high-risk list throughout 2024 and most of 2025. War risk premiums for these waters can be multiples of normal rates. The collateral damage extends beyond shippers. Egypt, whose Suez Canal Authority operates the canal and collects its revenue, suffered substantial fiscal losses. President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi publicly reported in March of 2025 that Egypt was losing roughly $800 million per month in canal revenue due to the diversion. Some annual estimates put Egypt's total Suez revenue loss for 2024 at around $7 billion. For a country running tight foreign exchange reserves, the canal revenue collapse turned a maritime security crisis into a fiscal one. Egypt, whose role in the broader Middle East political architecture matters, became a less stable economic actor because of attacks happening more than 1,000 miles south of its territory. Underneath UNCLOS, the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea, Bab-el-Mandeb qualifies as a strait used for international navigation under Articles 37 and 38. Ships transiting it are entitled to transit passage. That right was never legally suspended. Eritrea, on the western shore, is not a party to UNCLOS, which creates a small legal nuance, but the practical regime of free passage applies. The Houthi attacks are not legally piracy. UNCLOS Article 101 defines piracy as requiring private ends, and the Houthi attacks were politically motivated, launched from territory under their control. The legal characterization the international community has used is illegal attacks on commercial shipping, maritime terrorism, or threats to freedom of navigation. What's happening in the Red Sea is not legally a blockade. It is functionally an abandonment, driven by risk pricing. The Bab-el-Mandeb was never legally closed. The shipping moved anyway. Geography made the route vulnerable, an 18-mile bottleneck adjacent to territory controlled by a non-state actor with Iranian-supplied weapons. The economics of risk and insurance decided how much that vulnerability would cost. 3 naval missions intervened. The strikes worked, militarily. They did not change the insurance market's view of the route. The carriers stayed away. Egypt lost billions. The Cape of Good Hope route became a new normal, not a temporary detour. Geography made the attack cheap. The insurance market made the reroute rational. Geography created the constraint. The institution that decided what happened inside it wasn't a navy. It was the marine insurance market. This is the hinterland,